Up TTM fam, Eric here. Sunday night special episode. Now this is something I know I referenced this morning, but I was going to put it out earlier this week, but I had some time tonight because I've been thinking about this since this morning, um, and it's something I definitely want to get out there and kind of get off my chest. So I was like, hey, why not have it tonight? Perfect night, and here we go. Um, Emotional dyslexia isn't about lying. It's a term that I came up with because that's what it felt like to me personally. It's when somebody feels one thing, says another, and does something completely different. And if you've ever loved someone like that, you know how crazy making it feels. Now, tonight, I want to talk about emotional dyslexia, what it is, how it shows up in relationships, and what it did to me. Now, this is not a medical term. This is something that I kind of coined myself, um, simply because that's what it felt like. That's what it feels like. So don't come at me about, oh, it's not dyslexia, you're using the wrong term. Like this is just my interpretation of it, right? So, what is emotional dyslexia? My opinion. Keep in mind, this is all my opinion. It's when a person can't read their own emotions clearly, they can't express them clearly, and they can't act on them consistently. Um, it's not a manipulation, uh, so it's confusion, it's dysregulation, and it's fear. And that's kind of the biggest thing um, that I've pulled out of it. One line that I came up with: it's not deception, it's disorientation. So, in speaking about that, because as I'll get into, parts of this, at times it felt like a lot of lies and a lot of manipulation. But after the amount of reflection that I have done, because of this, I realized that it was not, but I'll get into that one later, right? So I'm going to kind of give you how it looks in real life. Um, it's like when they say I'm fine. When a woman says she's fine, what's your true take on it? Let's think about that for a second. They're not fine, right? I do not like that term. I despise that term. Um, but that's just me. But we all know when a woman says they're fine, they're not. Saying I love you, but acting avoidant or distant, that's not a part of normal things. Like if you love somebody wholeheartedly. Um, and, that's kind of like a take on that. The constant push pull is pulling close one week, then disappearing next week. That right there, that was, it's something that I experienced firsthand, and I knew it didn't sit right with me. Um, Another one is kind of anger driven. If they get angry, when what they really want is they're hurt or scared. That's a kind of a defense mechanism. Being affectionate in private and cold in public. This is something that I've kind of found through research. But in my case personally, that wasn't a part of it. When we were out, we were very affectionate. It wasn't like that. It was more hot and cold behavior behind the scenes when we were together. Out in public, everything was great. There was no issues. Um, and another thing is having future talks. Talking about where do we want to be 2, 3, 5 years. Talking about marriage, talking about integrations of both our families. Um, and I was ready to do that. I 100% wholeheartedly, and truthfully, she was too. Like, here's the thing: is everything that she had said was the truth, right? And I'm not discounting that at all because a lot of it comes in the moment. And the good stuff is in the moment, but also the negative stuff is in the moment. So that's one thing that it took me a while to kind of understand, that aspect of it. Um, Look at it like this. Their emotional GPS is broken. They're not reading their own feelings correctly. So what comes out looks like lies, reversals, mixed messages, So, it, and in the moment, I did not see that. I can fully admit that. Like, I knew something was going on. I just didn't know what it was because I couldn't put my finger on it. And it did feel like lies. It did feel like manipulation. But, you know, again, with the research that I've done, it wasn't. It wasn't because I know deep down inside she meant everything that she said. I know she meant, that she wanted to have depth, wanted to be consistent. She wanted to follow through presence. And, I gave all of that. She wanted to get married. She wanted to integrate. Like, she's very family orientated, and I know she wanted all of those things. But unfortunately, because of her nervous system and her emotional capacity for it, could not hold, and she could not receive what I was willingly giving within our relationship. So this kind of brings me up to, the mental health aspect of it. And, where, she is diagnosed as bipolar, and I had no problems with that because she was taking medication for it. But again, I did not know the full details of bipolar during our relationship because it didn't show in the first year or so. You know what I mean? Like, I did not see that aspect. But for those who don't know, big emotional swings. I think that's probably, one of the things that I did know about bipolar were the big emotional swings, and I was prepared for it. 100% I was. But it's what they feel is real in that moment. But the problem is that truth changes with whatever mental state they happen to be in. And that was something I was not prepared for. And now come to the other aspect of it, the undiagnosed fearful avoidant, because I am not a doctor. However, with the research that I've done, and we did speak about this, and she admitted that she leaned more towards the fearful avoidance side. We both took kind of like a test, and and I actually came up fearful avoidant as well, which was odd, because I thought I was more anxious at that point in time. However, they want everything that they're saying. The problem is it's driven by fear, and she's wired for survival. So they wanted closeness, but they feared it. Closeness for them triggered panic because they were not used to that. They were used to kind of the chaos that that she experienced in childhood, as well as previous relationships prior to us getting together. They misread safety as a danger and pulled away. And again, it's one of those, she didn't know how to receive what I was giving her, and she wouldn't believe what I was giving her. It turned into what I call, it was a 2 plus 2 equals 5 situation. Because one thing that, whatever she had told herself, that was word. And that was a battle that I could not win at all, no matter what I did. So, like I said, she wasn't lying when she said she loved me. She also wasn't lying when she said she couldn't do this at the end. Two different emotional states, two different truths. So, take a second to kind of, bring that in and think about your relationship and what your current struggles are or were when it came down to it. Because again, you know, they're not lies, and it feels like it because you don't have, well, excuse me, I didn't have all of the information. Because again, I can't I can't fight against scenarios that are being produced or narratives being produced by her. I can only go by the factual stuff that I know, and that was, that's one of the unfortunate aspects of this is I was fighting against a multitude of scenarios um, the whole way, and like I said, they weren't lies, like in words and conversations that we had. I mean, we had extensive conversations, and just because I know she had been burned in the past, I had been burned in the past, and we didn't want to get burned again. Like the whole purpose of, us starting, us doing this relationship was, my sole intention was when I date, it's for a purpose. It's to date, to marry, and that was it. And unfortunately, that did not happen. However, now I get to learn, more and more about this, excuse me, about, about her attachment style and trying to piece this all together. Um, so now I'm going to kind of go into why it felt like lies, and I apologize for being redundant or being a little repetitive, but I really kind of want to ram it home to you, the community, you, my viewers, that they weren't lies. They weren't, because you build trust on their words. You make decisions based on what they said in their connected state. Again, when you're having those honest conversations and you know, um, you're having those honest conversations, you're having those deep talks and future talks and all of that. If you don't know what is hiding behind that, then there's no way for you to sit there and prepare for that. So that's what I'm saying is when they were in their connected state, their decisions, you made the decision because it was coming from what you thought was a grounded person. But when it shifted, initially it felt like betrayal, felt like gaslighting. Right? You almost feel played, or you tricked me. But really, their emotions flipped, and their fear took over, right? And their attachment system panicked. And when you have kind of all of those things for somebody who treats love as dangerous or safety as danger, you can't. There's nothing that you can do. Like you can, I tried to love harder and I tried to, prove every single thing, and it didn't get me anywhere simply because I couldn't fix her. Because she can only fix her. So getting back to, this, it felt like lies because I was steady and she wasn't. My truth stayed the same. Here's a key point. Hers kept changing. And hers kept changing because of the variety of narratives that she had going on at the same time. And, as I mentioned before, it was a no-win situation for me. No matter what I did, I wasn't going to win that battle. And with that, I'll get into the impact that it had on me. But before I get into that is, learning about, this portion of it. Huey. Damn. Long weekend. Learning about this portion of it and really applying it to our relationship and how certain things went down and what happened when we got to here and then we got to here and we got to here, you know, like it made sense. It finally was just like clicked. It's like, okay, there it is. Now, let's get into the impact that, it had on me. First off, I started doubting myself. I started doubting my reality, you know, because I was so locked in that, again, because it was brought to my attention and, I thought it was me. So I started doubting myself. I would replay conversations. I would, go over everything in detail to see kind of where I messed up. And there was a lot of things that, you know, I accepted because she was telling me. Try to decode every word or gesture, and that just drove me, nuts at one point. And then when we were talking on things in the last, I would say 6 months, that's 5, 6 months, I was walking on eggshells because I didn't, you know, I didn't want to upset her. I didn't want to trigger anything. And, there was a point in time where I was blaming myself early on. Like after the job, I was like, this is all me. I can't believe this is me. And this is before I knew about the FA attachment, And I tried to be the emotional translator. And it just did not work. Why? Because it was too much, you know. And loving someone with emotional dyslexia turns you into a full-time interpreter, and that's what I felt like I was doing. You're always translating what they say versus what they actually feel versus what they actually do, and that drained me. Truth be told, that drained me because I'm trying to do 3 different things at once, and I'm good, but I'm not that good, So again, I shouldered a lot of it, and I thought it really was me. Now, where I did, throughout, pretty much since June, and this was after our first kind of major, end of May, beginning of June was our first, real breakup, which truthfully was almost a year and a half into our relationship, and that's when I was deep diving into every aspect of me, and then trying to see how it fell within our dynamic. And that's where certain things that that I was learning about her, but also about myself. Learning that I can't be someone's emotional GPS. I can't build a stable life on unstable truth. And that is, where the goalpost kept moving, kept going, boom, 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 and it's just like it kept missing. Oh, I would hit one, okay. But missing doink, oh, got one, so it just, with the goalpost constantly moving, it became next to impossible, but I was trying like hell. I absolutely was because I was determined. Consistency is greater than intensity. And that right there, being consistent, like that was one thing that I really focused on was, that was something that she wanted and that's something that I provided. This next part, this one threw me for a loop until, and this is where I kind of found projection into, our relationship. Words matter, 100%, but patterns are the real truth. Now, I remember during one time I was over her house, and she had mentioned that she was always looking at patterns, and she was always hypervigilant on patterns because that's what damaged her previously. And I'm like, and I asked myself, do I have patterns? Do I? But I wasn't entirely sure, and I didn't think that I had patterns, but come to find out that was, kind of her projecting what she had onto me. And that was a sobering experience to kind of say the least. So, You know, you're not crazy for feeling confused. Situation overall is confusing, right? And this attachment style is fucking confusing. It's back asswards, man. I tell you, it's fucking nutty. Um, but it's something that has to be dealt with, you know, and it's something that we all have to, you know, people are going to experience, you know, with this. You know, their emotions may shift, but your standards can't, you know, and that's something that I've learned. Another thing I learned is I can have compassion for their struggle and still choose my own peace, and that's what I did at the end. Um, you know, when we had our final face to face, um, you know, at that point in time, like, you know, she had said she couldn't do this, and I know that was a defense mechanism. Okay, that's fine. You know, and then, you know, more and more, I then kind of prompted an email that I sent to her. Because to me, email was easier. Like I personally like sending long things through text wasn't cool. But you know, I was able to send her an email because at that point in time, like I'm not one to give up. You know, I'm one to fight constantly. But in the sense of it, when I hear you say certain things, then that's what, you know, ultimately, like, I take. But I still had to go that one step further, not to get the last word, right? Like, that's not what the email was about. The email was about showing her I knew exactly who she was, and I loved her for exactly who she was. And that's what I wanted her to see. And then I decided, you know, at that point in time, some things were said, you know, kind of back and forth, and it started turning into a negative connotation, you know, basically calling me a liar. And I'm like, I haven't lied one fucking bit in this relationship. You know, again, this was the purest relationship I had ever been in my life. So like I knew the truth of that. So I mean, reading that, and I'm not gonna lie, it stung, but you know, finally I had to, you know, I had to keep my peace simply because that's the only way I'm gonna be able to move on is by keeping my peace. Like what? Why am I gonna entertain something, right? When the cycle is just gonna continue and continue. So um, you know, and finally I had to say my goodbye, and that's what I did. You know, my last words spoken to her were like, "Understood, goodbye." And since then, I haven't, you know, haven't heard from her. And you know, I honestly, I wish her well, and I said in a previous video that I forgave her, and I did, and I forgave myself, and I did, and you know, because at the end of the day, you know, God has a plan. And that's one thing that I am learning with my spiritual journey, is God does have a plan. And I'm letting her go. You know, the one thing about letting somebody go, before I get into my closing reflection on this, is you're letting them go now. Does it mean forever? No, not necessarily. Unless they absolutely did you dirty. But, you know, I wasn't done dirty. It was unfortunate, you know, but all in all, I wasn't done dirty. And, you know, I will always be civil. I will always, you know, I will always say hi. I will always have a space for, and I'll always be grateful for the ability that, excuse me, for the opportunity for me to love her, because I did. It was the truest, purest, most form of love that I've ever had, you know, and she had shown me something that I had never seen before or gone through before in a relationship. And that's something I'm forever grateful for. I'm grateful for the fact that I've been able to learn a substantial amount about myself and my growth patterns that that I see that I'm applying in my day to day, and then in a future relationship when that comes down. So, you know, with every chapter closed, you start a new chapter. But then again, with this one, it was enlightening, and I am grateful for that. So, I know I kind of sidetracked. That's just where I am. It's been a long weekend, but a great weekend, fantastic weekend. Honestly, like it was something definitely for the books for me, and I enjoyed it. So, with that being said, my closing reflection: emotional dyslexia doesn't make somebody evil. It makes them unsafe to build a life with until they've done their own work. Now, think about that. Think about that, each person has to do their own work to put their best foot forward to be able to be in a relationship. Now, there are some people who never do the work, and there are some people that do. Those that don't are going to continue to repeat their patterns. Complete their patterns, complete their cycles. And that's really no way to continue to go through life. And the real key to it is they have to do their own work, whether it's whether they get preferably professional help, to be able to clear up whatever traumas that they experience as a child or as a young adult or even as an adult. Like, you have to get that cleared up, and not necessarily through medication, right? Like, medication to me it only goes so far. If you have too much of something, you're drooling all over yourself, and you're doing the Aussie shuffle, as I call it. You know, but again, it's through whether it be a therapist talking to a live therapist, somatic therapy, just something to be able to have you release that so you can live the life that you deserve rather than living in this, sick cycle. So the second part of that is if you ever felt like you've been lied to, but in your gut you knew it was just that they were just lost in themselves, this is your language for that. And I knew, because I consider myself pretty intuitive. Like, I knew something was wrong. I knew, like, the one thing that, you know, um, that we were is we were dialed in, to each other. And even to this day, I still feel, waves of our relationship. And, and again, I'm going to sidetrack here, but, stuff happens. You know what I mean? Like, the other day, I woke up and she was the first thing on my mind. And I was just like, what the hell is this? Right? And it was just unprovoked. And then, I dropped my daughter off at school, and then I remember driving to work. And I got on the highway, and all of a sudden started just super emotional, started crying, and I'm like, what the hell is going on? But that's just, that's the nature of the beast, where, if you put, this isn't something that you get over in the span of, a couple of weeks. And at least not for me, right? And I think because I opened myself up in all three areas: physical, emotional, spiritual, especially emotional. That's why I'm still feeling strongly when I do get hit with a wave of that, of our relationship. So, but I also know it's a part of my healing too. So I just take everything, I feel it, and I work through it, and I continue to move forward. I'm going to end with this. Have you ever been in a relationship where the words the feelings and actions seem to line up? Let me know. Leave a comment. Love to hear from you. But that is my episode on emotional dyslexia. Again, I said it in the beginning, I'm going to say it now. This is a term that I came up with because that's how it felt to me. And truthfully, if it doesn't feel right to you, hey, you know what? So be it. But to me, that's just the way it felt like. But again, I appreciate you guys all tuning in on this Sunday night. We got the week started up. Week ahead. Coming into 3 weeks till Christmas. A lot of stuff going on. But I will see you guys. I don't know if I may do another episode, a special episode later on this week. I don't know yet. But we do have one coming up, episode 23, I think next Sunday, 7 a.m. So, looking forward to that. But with that being said, you guys all have a great night. Talk to you later.